Well, hello! And isn't it cool that we have Andreas Deja here with us? Now, if you don't know who Andreas Deja is, just look behind me. The animator of Jafar, a Scar, a Gaston, King Triton, Mickey. Yeah, come on, you love those? And the great news is, after the screening, Andreas is going to stay behind and draw up each and every one of you a sketch of your favorite character. See, I had that going on.
Yeah, I didn't realize that one.
Sorry, great. Well, we are here to talk about Pinocchio. Pinocchio, there we go. Wait a minute.
Oh no, that's
The screen is going berserk on us. There we are. So, how many of you have seen Pinocchio? Who has not seen Pinocchio? Where have you people been? Wow. Well, now, this week, Pinocchio celebrates its 75th anniversary. Wow. 1940. That's a long time ago.
And it still looks brand new and fresh and wonderful.
Yeah, it sure does. And the great thing about Pinocchio is that many film historians and critics claim that Pinocchio is the most technically perfect animated feature of all time, and they all claim it's a masterpiece. So, in your opinion, Andreas, why is Pinocchio a masterpiece?
Yeah, you know, especially animators love it because there's so much detail in the film without making the picture look cluttered. Because if you add too much on it, sometimes it looks overdone. It still works really well, but there's just a love and a passion on the screen that the artists have for making the film. They just came off Snow White, as you all know, and the confidence level of the crew was so high, and they just gave it all they've done in this movie.
Well, you mentioned Snow White. Now, if...
Back to my...
pedal on the right.
Be good! So if there hadn't been a Snow White, there would not have been a Pinocchio.
And we wouldn't be here tonight.
Yeah, we wouldn't be here. There'd be no Disneyland.
Right.
And what I don't think a lot of people realize that the planning of Pinocchio was concurrent with Snow White. Is that correct?
Yeah, you know what? Walt had a long-term plan. He didn't just plan one feature. He saw into the future. So Pinocchio was also being planned as Snow White was being drawn. And then same with the others. Bambi was in the early stages, Fantasia.
And talk to us about the technical advances that they're going to see in Pinocchio tonight. I mean, it's a very technically sophisticated film.
Yeah. There's this thing that some of you might have heard called the multi-plane camera. So what that is, you take basically a flat background and paint different levels and film them away from each other at a certain distance. And then all of a sudden you have certain things out of focus, and the most important thing is in focus. And you get this feeling of unexpected depth. Snow White had some of that. Pinocchio has tons of it.
But it makes it feel almost 3D.
Yeah, you're in the movie. You know, like there's that famous shot, which I think we're going to talk later, where the camera goes over the village and over the tower, and you see like the pigeons flying, then through a gate and onto some townspeople. It goes on and on. Really expensive stuff in those days.
Yeah, very expensive, very expensive. Now, Pinocchio is perhaps the most European of all the Disney animated features, correct?
Yeah, sort of set in the Alps, you know, brings it sort of home in terms of being European. The little hat that Pinocchio's wearing is a rolling hat.
Yeah.
So it has those visual cues.
And so, Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia, much less so. Mm-hmm. So those two films, those first two, Snow White and Pinocchio, very, very European. And they were influenced by many of the European artists who had come over to the States before the outbreak of World War II. One of them was a fellow by the name of Gustav Tengren. Not an easy name to say. I should be applauded for saying that. Gustav Tengren.
Everybody, Gustav
Tengren. There you go. Gustav, there you're right. And he had a great influence on the look of this film. So we're going to take you through some of the artwork from Gustav Tengren, which is spectacular. Let's take a look at this back here.
This is a drawing that he must have done when he was there. I'm not quite sure, but this is in a small German town called Rothenburg in the south of Germany. And it looks just like that, very fairy tale-ish and charming. And he did many studies like this.
Yeah, and you can see the influence of this on the film a little bit later.
Yes.
Now this next piece here, you were talking about that multi-plane shot. So as you can see here in this piece that he did, you can see Falfel, Gideon, and Pinocchio walking through the streets of this little Tyrolean town. And when you see the shot in the film, it's one of the greatest shots in animation history. As you said, when the camera pans down through the town,
It's seamless. And these things take so much planning, like weeks and weeks of planning, and then weeks and weeks of filming this stuff. And like I said earlier on, they went all the way. They didn't shy away from technically complicated, beautiful things like this one.
Right. Here's another one of his pieces there. I mean, look how gorgeous these backgrounds are.
And this is not even a final background. This is just a study for the film to set up the colors and the staging and light and the art direction overall. Just a gorgeous watercolor painting.
Now, this next one's one of my favorites. The Blue Fairy. Who doesn't love the Blue Fairy?
Look at the feeling of light. I mean, this is really like a glowing person in the most beautiful way. You know, very elegant and stylish, and all done in watercolor.
Now, I always thought the Blue Fairy in this shot looked like a very young Debbie Reynolds. But in actuality, this Blue Fairy owes a lot to Snow White.
Because the live-action model for the animation study for Snow White was Marge Champion. And she also modeled for the Blue Fairy. So she did both films.
Right. This next one's very charming.
Yeah, this is a bunch of school kids totally being late, running off. Oh no, they actually were going to see Geppetto's workshop.
Yeah, there's Geppetto's workshop. This next one, by the way, this next piece I'm going to show you has nothing to do with Frozen.
Yes, it does.
I love this. Look how beautiful that is. And it's little Pinocchio when he goes back to find Geppetto.
That's right. And that's the old model of him too. It's not the final design yet. But this, of course, didn't make it into the film. But there are so many, I mean, for a film like this, so many studies and drawings and paintings done that weren't used.
Yeah. This next one, these next images,
gorgeous.
I love. Look at the lighting on the top piece of concept art there.
I mean, the top piece just knocks me out because of the feeling of nighttime, which you see in the middle of the painting. Is all these wonderful night blues, and then those illuminated spots on the right and left that have some street lighting on it. This is beautiful.
And here's another good example of that. Little Pinocchio is Stromboli, the mean puppeteer. And again, that lighting that you're talking about.
It's just gorgeous. And I love that dark foreground element. It gives it a feeling of space, that this thing's closer to you and the characters are further in the back. It's just a masterpiece.
Now, for those of you who have seen Pinocchio, you know it's a rather dark film. And when I showed Andreas this next one, he said, oh my gosh, it looks like a horror movie.
It does. Look at this. Hitchcock. Animated Hitchcock. You know? I mean, they did not...
Animated Hitchcock.
Yeah. This is the new label for the film. But they didn't shy away from showing really scary things.
Yeah.
Because Walt thought it's okay to scare kids once in a while throughout the film as long as the ending turns out right.
Right, absolutely.
It's just gorgeous.
I love this one over here.
Yeah.
Pinocchio in the water. And one of the great things about Pinocchio, watch the effects animation in Pinocchio when he's underwater and how they make that illusion of water over the cells and everything.
And all these bubbles and every little wave, all that was hand drawn and then hand painted by a great number of artists. So this is really a handcrafted film.
Yeah, very much so. Now, to get to the backgrounds, these are kind of fun.
I mean, these things remind me of like a Rembrandt paintings. You know, they have the integrity and the attention to detail, like the light, the spotlight effect on these things. They're master paintings, really.
Absolutely. Now, there are two Disney legends that worked on Pinocchio, among many others, Claude Coats and Ken Anderson. And if you're familiar with the look of the film Pinocchio, and you go over on Pinocchio's Daring Journey, I dare you to see a difference in the art direction. I mean, this whole scene is replicated in the attraction, this bottom scene right here. It's gorgeous.
Very, very close to it. Yeah.
And of course, you've got Pleasure Island,
which turned later on into this place. Lots of pleasure in it. But I wanted to say one more thing about watercolors. For those of you who might not be artists, but it is the most difficult medium to paint in because you just work with wet paper, you put washes over it, and you have to be perfect the first time around. You cannot go back in after it's dry and change it. It has to be perfect when it's wet. So these guys are his masters instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Now this next image, speaking of scary, this is a little scary.
It is. I mean, that is one evil fox.
Well, one scary Pinocchio, too.
One scary Pinocchio, too. I think that's why they changed him and changed his look. But just the staging of this, there's something haunting about that.
Yeah, so Joe Grant did this. This is one of the earliest representations of Pinocchio, and he looks like a scary puppet. Speaking of scary puppets.
And these, I believe, are Albert Herder, who was Swiss and worked at the studio, at least the top one, would be his sketches. And they really wanted to have a marionette as an animated character.
But it doesn't look very appealing.
It doesn't look very appealing, and Walt at least thought that too. I mean, you look at these drawings, and yeah, you can see this animated, but there is something missing still.
Well, it looks very stiff.
Yeah.
It doesn't look fun. Now, is it true that Walt had some footage animated with Pinocchio looking like this?
They had quite a few scenes animated already, mostly Ollie Johnston, who was one of the supervising animators on the character. He animated roughly this model when he was at this stage. And then after months and months of work, Walt saw it and he said, guys, it doesn't work. It doesn't look appealing enough, do it over. So they cut all the animation out and started over. And then there was one animator who didn't like anything. He didn't like this version either, because they tried to make it more and more round, as you can see in this drawing, and he didn't like this either. And then he was told, well, if you're so outspoken about this, put your pencil where your mouth is. So Milt Kahl, who was the animator, went to his desk and did these beautiful scenes in which he showed that he thought as the character as a little kid, not as a puppet. He said the fact that he has wooden arms and legs is really secondary. We have to think of him as a real person, a real kid. And that changed everything, as you can see.
Yeah, he's much more rounded, much more cuter.
Really appealing, you know, wonderful poses, nice expressions. So this is what Walt bought, and that made Milt Kahl one of the supervising animators.
Yeah. Now, one of the things you should listen for in the film, a child actor by the name of Dickie Jones was the voice of Pinocchio. And if you're a film fan, if you're a classic movie, let's hear it for Dickie Jones. Okay. Yeah. That's Dickie's family out there in the audience. If you're a classic film fan, you've seen Dickie Jones before. He plays the little page boy in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And he's the little kid that shows James Stewart where his seat is in Congress. And Dickie Jones is so cute in this movie. The little inflections that he has when, like, Geppetto is trying to explain that tomorrow, Pinocchio, you have to go to school. And he's like, why? Well, so you can learn and be smart. Why? You know. Oh, because. And then there's this kind of sad beat. Pinocchio goes, oh. It's very cute. Yeah, it's cute stuff.
It's real. It's real.
Now, this next version of Pinocchio, this is when he turns into a little boy.
Yeah, and many people actually prefer him as a puppet, even though, of course, he has to turn into a real boy. That's the story. But there's something really cute about him being a puppet.
Yeah.
Than this human version.
Yeah, you never see him represented like this anywhere.
It's only
always
for
a puppet. Yeah. Now, another character that went through a lot of transformation is this fella right here. I'm sure you all recognize Jiminy Cricket. Now, tell us about how did Jiminy start out?
Well, here we see Walt Kimball, the animator, and that is what he looks like in the film. But to get there, Walt Kimball really had to really struggle and redraw the character over and over again because Walt kept telling him the same thing, not appealing enough, you know, too much like an insect.
Like this.
Like this. This is not Jiminy Cricket. This is from a short called The Grasshopper and the Ants, which was done earlier. And this is a cartoon cricket with all these spiky legs and things like that. And that's what Kimball drew. Just gave him a hat, and Walt said not appealing enough. So then we see other versions. This is from a short called Goofy and Wilbur, and that's a little bit more appealing, but it's still insect-like looking.
Yeah.
Walt didn't care
not cuddly.
No, it's not cuddly. So then here we can see it's getting closer and closer, and finally
he's a little rounder, and here he is as we know him today.
That's the final model. And Kimball always said, you know, in the end, I didn't really draw or animate a cricket. It's a little man with a hat, you know, but people think he's a cricket because we call him that, you know.
Well, you were saying earlier, just like the sounds of Pinocchio, he doesn't really look like a puppet. But at the beginning of the film, when he falls down, you hear all this wood clanking everywhere, and the audience buys it.
Absolutely.
But who grew on the films of the 50s. Does anybody remember I'm No Fool?
Yes.
Jiminy Cricket.
Who can sing that song? Come on, louder.
I'm going to live to be 33.
She has all the lyrics.
Very
You
good.
should win something, but not tonight. Let's talk about the sorry about that. Let's talk about, quick, get me out of this, Andreas. Let's talk about the models.
Okay, this was the Joe Branston department, the character model department. They would create three-dimensional models
For the animators to study, and we still have them. On Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, you know, I have a model of Scar, I have a model of Jafar, and they really help the animator to visualize the character in dimensions, so we can hold it up and turn it, you know, and draw tough angles and so forth. So these are original models done for the animators.
We were talking earlier about this shot here of Stromboli's wagon. There's a great scene in this film where it's raining, and there's thunder and lightning, and the wagon is going over a bumpy road, and as you look into the window of the wagon, you see the marionettes moving, and all of that is done by hand, and they had to synchronize everything.
But these models really help, because they could study these models and see how this thing moved and wobbled on his wheels, you know, and they just studied all this stuff.
Yeah. Now, the other great thing about Pinocchio is some of the greatest Disney animators of all time worked on Pinocchio. So we have up here
Here's some of them.
Fred Moore.
Fred Moore was like a young superstar. He was like a kid animator. He was barely in his early 20s, you know, when he did this.
Eric Larson.
Eric Larson, who was the person who hired me to Walt Disney Studios in 1980. That's just on the side. But he is there as a young animator, Joey Figaro.
Yeah.
He helped us
And
supervise.
then Norm Ferguson.
We have Norm Ferguson doing the cat, Gideon.
Yeah, Gideon.
And then we had probably the all-time superstar animator in those days was Bill Tyler, because he has such a range. He's drawing Stromboli over there. He had an enormous range. He also did Baby Dumbo later on, you know. So they really
Okay, but wait a minute, hold it. What Andreas isn't telling you is that Bill Tyler animated Cute Baby Dumbo, right? We all know Cute Baby Dumbo? He also did the devil in Night on Bald Mountain and Fantasia.
Talking about range, you know, that man could do no wrong. He was an amazing animator.
He would scare me if I met him.
Well, he intended to.
Yeah. Well, there's no doubt that Pinocchio is a masterpiece classic film, and over the last 75 years, it has thrilled audiences around the world and is very much a part of our culture. As a matter of fact, Pinocchio is one of the few animated films that are part of the National Film Registry. It was one of the first, I think.
Yeah.
Every year, Congress comes out with a list of films that they designate and put on the National Film Registry, basically saying that these films are national treasures. So what you're going to see tonight is considered a national treasure. So that's pretty darn cool. It is. That's pretty darn
I
cool.
think once you create a masterpiece and it turns out so well, it's for the ages. It'll stay a masterpiece for all time.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you, Andreas, for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I know you guys want to get to the movie, so we'll walk off this way. Thank you very much. Everybody, next round of applause for Andreas. Now, one of the other great things about Pinocchio, as you'll see in a few minutes, is the outstanding music from Pinocchio. Now, come on, you guys know the songs, I've Got No Strings, right? Give a Little Whistle. And the great thing about Pinocchio, too, is that it was the first Disney film ever to win an Oscar for Best Song and an Oscar for Best Score. And the song that won Best Oscar has basically become the anthem, the theme song, if you will, for the entire Walt Disney Company. So how many of you have been on the ships of the Disney Cruise Line? Okay, so when they do the bell, you've heard this song, and anybody who has seen a film from Walt Disney Pictures has heard the first few notes of this song as the movie opens, as those fireworks go across the castle. And of course, we all know the song as When You Wish Upon a Star. So we think that's the perfect way to end our presentation tonight. Hope you have a great time and enjoy Walt Disney's Pinocchio.